Welcome back to the blog, everybody. And I'm super thrilled and excited this week to introduce you to a friend that I met online a couple of years ago. We've never met in person. So I'm kind of excited to be able to see her face to face here along with you. This is Lori DeJong. Hi, Lori.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. I'm really excited to have you here. I'm always
Excited to be
excited
here.
to host debut authors. As someone who's trying to get published myself, just that excitement of your first book coming out. I love to be able to promote debut authors. So thanks for joining me for this interview.
Oh,
And
thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
great. So I want to make the most of our time. I'm going to check the time. Okay. And I'm going to turn it over to you and let you just introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself, your family, anything you want us to know about Lori.
Okay. Well, I'm Lori DeYoung. I live in Georgetown, Texas, which is about 30 miles north of Austin, kind of like right in the middle.
Okay.
And lived here since 2005, born and raised in Phoenix, but got to Texas as soon as I could. I love it here. Absolutely love it. And been married for 30 years to my husband, Eric. We have a grown daughter who's 23. She lives up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She's doing really well up there. And we have two fur babies, Buddy and Lily, that live in our otherwise empty nest.
Yeah.
So that's
So
about.
our oldest daughter lives in the Dallas Fort Worth
Oh,
area.
that's right. I knew
Oh,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
they love it there too. They love living in
Mhm.
Texas.
She
We
loves it.
enjoy visiting. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey, how you started writing, when you started writing.
I actually started writing. It was a little bit prideful because this was back in like the late 1990s, early 2000s, and I was reading all the little Harlequin like category romances, and I like clean stuff, so I was reading like the clean lines and stuff. And you think, oh gosh, I could write this, and so I just started writing in a void, just started writing all these stories that were in my head. And I had my daughter, so I was a stay-at-home mom for the first time. So I was just writing and writing and writing. And then somebody suggested that I should look into Romance Writers of America. And I thought, okay. And this was back when it was it really was a great organization back in the day. I got a huge writing education. And once I got involved with them and realized this is a craft that has to be honed, and learned and tried by fire. And you don't, very rarely do you just write something, send it in, and they're like, oh, this is exactly what we've been looking for. So I realized that I really needed to learn to write.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how it started.
And how
And I
long
was
ago was that again?
this was probably, I think I joined RWA in 2002. My daughter was about 2 years old.
Okay.
And I was writing secular, like I was targeting like Harlequin super romance at the time. But as a woman of faith, there were just certain things I wouldn't write and I wouldn't allow my characters to do. And you can only write so many marriages of convenience, or, there's only, as a clean romance writer, I felt like it was just difficult for me to stay on that path. And I think I had been convicted to write inspirational fiction for a while before I actually surrendered and said, okay, this is what I want to write. And I wished I'd done it from the beginning, because I had such peace about the words that were coming, and the things I was able to talk about God and use scripture, and it was so much more me.
Mhm.
And inspirational writing has come so far now that it isn't all just, sweet and everything's perfect. It's people dealing with real life issues and how they overcome those with faith, and learning about God and following hard after him. And so I
Mhm.
love being able to write, characters like that, and with themes that are real to this,
Right.
this crazy world we live in. So
Crazy is right.
yeah, so I didn't write. In 2009, our world kind of turned upside down when my husband got laid off from his job. And so we kind of went through several years of just turmoil. I had to go back to work, and that was fine and everything. But I couldn't afford to pay dues, and I got away from my writing because I was tired, and I still had a little girl, and I just didn't. I kind of lost my writing mojo, or whatever you want to call it. And so from about 2009 to the end of 2019 is when a friend said, found out I was a writer, so to speak. And she said, you need to come to my ACFW group. And so that's how I got started back into my writing in 2020
Hmm.
and have been just going after it
Had it.
since then and just really finding the joy in it again. I wish I hadn't waited 10 years. I wish I hadn't let that 10 years go by, but you can't live in your regrets. You just got to keep moving forward. And I've been
Right.
really blessed.
So what genre do you write in now?
I write Christian contemporary romance, so it's all faith-based and it's all, I want to call it timeless because I mean there's cell phones and things like that in the stories, but I hope that if someone picked up my book 6 or 7 years from now, it would still feel contemporary to them.
So what inspired you to write romance and why contemporary?
Well, I'm maybe I'm too lazy to be a historical writer. I don't know, but I love research, but and I love to read historical, which is funny because I really enjoy it, especially if it's Western, um, American Western historical. I really enjoy. If there's cowboys and
Yeah.
cows and horses and stuff, I really love that. But I have just never felt drawn to write in that genre. I really wanted to hit on themes and things that we see in today's world, whether it's drug abuse or abortion or whatever the situation may be, that people are dealing with it in the here and now. And how does a Christian, how do they counsel a friend, who just made this horrible decision, and none of my protagonists have had abortions or anything like that, but I do want to be able to examine how would you handle, how do they handle it if someone comes to them that needs to be drawn to the Lord. And I think that's why I want to write contemporary, or why I'm comfortable with contemporary, because I will, I'm not really afraid to kind of go there and say this is what we're seeing in today's world, and how do we as Christians need to examine that. My
Mhm.
protagonists are fictional, but what they go through and what they believe and the words they say, they're very real,
Yeah.
as far as um, how we need to be ambassadors for Christ in a world that's hurting.
Mhm.
And so that's what I hope people see when they pick up a book of mine, that they see someone who's, oh, no, she's really been through it. And look at her now. And, or him even. Yeah, he had a tragedy in his past, but look what he did with that.
Right.
And so that's why I really enjoy writing contemporary and romance. I'm just a romantic, I guess. I just really enjoy a happy ending. I don't want to read a book and at the end go, oh my goodness, that wasn't the way it was supposed to end. So but as a romance writer, that's kind of the challenge, because your audience knows when they pick up a romance, it's going to have a happily ever after, but you have to make the journey from the beginning to the end worth them giving their time to read the book,
Mm-hmm.
because they know pretty much how it's going to end, but how do they get there? And so you
Mm-hmm.
have to make that interesting.
I think that a lot of times too, when I see reviews on some of the romance books or something, they're saying, well, you know how it's going to end. It's typical, they're going to blah 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 and get together at the end, and you know, but it's romance, so you knew that going in.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You know that's how it's going to end.
Yeah,
But I love the
absolutely.
contemporary stories too, just for the realness. I'm all about real life and authenticity and being vulnerable and putting it out there. And like you said, you're not afraid to go there. I feel like, God too has always put me in places in my life where I'm going against the flow, the current
Right.
culture. And that just seems to be my MO. So
I hear
I
you.
hear you. I hear you with that. I'm right there with you. So let's talk a little bit about your book that's coming out. It's called Love's True Calling. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the premise of the story, the maybe the theme that's running through the story.
Okay. It's a reunion story. We're looking at tropes. It's a two individuals who were best friends as children. They met in kindergarten, this little redhead boy and this beautiful little girl, and they met in kindergarten. And he comes from a very Christian family, And she does not. She comes from a very high powered kind of uh, very academically and professionally focused family, and her parents anyway. And so they became the best of friends, and she was like always at his house because his mom was a stay-at-home mom that showered her with love that she wasn't really getting. So she has this void in her that's parent shaped. And as they grew up, their lives took different paths socially. He was the academic, the red-haired, bespectacled boy, and she was the cheerleader who all the athletes were paying attention to all of a sudden, and stuff. And they just kind of went different directions. And it really, one of the themes in there is peer group and how you can bridge the gaps between peer groups by showing how they can respect each other. That a little, that just because somebody looks like they're popular and pretty and has, all the stuff, they can be very damaged inside. And if someone's a bully, okay, what's coming from that? What's causing that in him? Is there something broken in him? And Wyatt, my male protagonist, endured a tragedy in high school that propelled him to start a ministry when he was in grad school, because has his PhD in adolescent psychology, and this tragedy also kind of propelled him into his chosen field. But he started this ministry. It was a student ministry, and it was focused on kids who they consider themselves living on the fringe. They're on the outside looking in. They're the ones that maybe are picked on or completely ignored, or they're not the kids that are treated well. And because that was kind of his experience in high school. Hers was completely different. She was Miss Everything. Well, they had a little in the backstory, they had a little reuniting in high school that looked like it might turn into something else now that they were more mature, and but it ended badly. It ended in heartbreak. And so the story opens with them finding themselves face to face after 11 years since that night. Or since that night, she kind of shut the door on him and left him on her porch, essentially, that they are seeing each other. And he doesn't know why that happened. And he, as a kid, kind of let that bitterness, and he didn't realize he still had that root of bitterness. But anyway, they see each other, and they're in a situation now where he has the power. And he's the professor, she's a student, but he's just a substitute professor in this class that she's taking because she's going back to school. And so then the story just kind of goes through what's happened to them in the ensuing years, that they had not seen each other, and how she gets involved in his ministry, but how she has this vision for how they can, instead of just ministering to this particular group, how they could bridge groups, how they could make a bridge to different peer groups. He's resistant to that because he's trying to get a national grant to move his ministry, into a national type ministry. I kind of loosely founded it on Young Life, that it's this ministry. It's not church based, or, it's not a youth ministry, so to speak, from a church. It's for any student anywhere. They're not necessarily churched students. He really wants to reach out to kids who maybe don't know anything about Jesus and show them that that's where they need to be looking for their value, not in who says they have value, but in who God says they are. And so that's kind of a prevailing theme through the thing. So he has to kind of go through his own arc of, how much has he let unforgiveness that he didn't even realize was still there, plant this little root of bitterness in him. And I mean, he's a great guy. He's a nice guy. And like I said, he wasn't even really aware that this had built up in him. But that's kind of the premise, is just seeing how they use the lives that they've grown into this student ministry, and how they work that out, how they realize that, God may be calling him one way, they're in love with each other, but God may be calling him one way and calling her another way. And are they willing? My dogs just came home. That's why you hear the jangling. But that's why they have to come to that point where they're like, do we follow God or do we stay together? And how does that resonate, or how does that resolve?
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about how you incorporate Christ and hope into the story, and you've kind of answered that with telling about the novel and the premise of it and the whole ministry aspect. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of opportunities as you're going through the story to talk about Christ. And
Absolutely. Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
so,
It really was, oh, I just had a thought and I lost it. For her, she had lived all of her life trying to please, who is she living for, because she never could please her parents. And so being Miss Everything in high school to her was finding that validation that she so badly needed. And then after that was gone, she was a little lost.
mhm,
And so now, as what she considers herself a newbie Christian. She's only been a Christian about a year when the story opens, and she, her, through the story, she learns that the only person I need to please is God, and with what I do with my life.
yeah,
And so, which brings her to some decisions that she has to come to with regard to her family and even with Wyatt, with
mhm.
which direction is she going to take.
So, what about the setting? Where is this located? And is it a real or a fictional place? Was it
It's very
inspired
real.
by something?
It's very real. It's Arlington, Texas, Dallas
Okay.
Fort Worth area. And I patterned the college where the story opens in a college setting, although it's not a college book. That's really the only time you see something happen. Well, no, there's two scenes that are on campus, but other than that, it's not a back to school kind of book or story. But my daughter went to Dallas Baptist University, which is the small Christian university up there. That's just such a great school and beautiful setting. And I kind of patterned this little, I called it Dallas Heritage University, and I kind of patterned it after DBU. So just a little bit of shout out there to DBU. But so it's a very real place. I use some very real, like I talk about Six Flags and things like that. But then other places inside the story are fictional.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So when a person reads the story and they get to that last page and they close the book at the end, what are you hoping they're going to walk away with? What's the main takeaway?
The main takeaway, I hope that they just felt the redemptive power of God's love. I think more than anything, whether they're a new Christian or have been a Christian for 50 years or a Christian for 20 years or wherever they are in their walk, I hope when they get to the end, they saw that in the book, that God can take anyone from any walk of life, no matter what they've done or who they've been, and redeems them into something beautiful for his purposes. And I think more than anything, I hope people who might be in the trenches or maybe have a child that's a prodigal child or something will really see that there's always hope, and that there could be peace in knowing that that child's in God's hands,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that whatever you go through in your life, if used for the kingdom, can just transform that. I mean, you can still feel the grief and you can still feel the pain, um, but you know that I want to use this to bring honor and glory. It validates or gives purpose to that tragedy or circumstance that maybe you made a bad choice and you regret it, but I'm not going to live there because now I can take it. I can teach kids not to follow in my footsteps, or whatever the situation might be. So that's what I really hope they go away with. At the very least, I hope they close the book and go, I enjoyed that story, that it just leaves them feeling good about just seeing a young couple and
Mm-hmm.
and how they go from one point to another.
Yeah, because I mean, people read a lot as entertainment. They escape the real world um, to go into this fictional world. And I think a lot of times when you can see someone in a story kind of facing a similar situation that you're facing, and you see them get through it and how they get through it, that it's helpful, it's encouraging, to say, okay, there's somebody out there that understands, even if this is a fictional character, there's an author behind this story that understands.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
if I've done my job right, there's an author behind the author. I really, um, I just bathe all my stuff, whatever I'm working on, it's just showered in prayer. And so I'm hoping that the words I'm putting out there are the words that were given to me, to put out there for His glory is really all I can hope for.
Because all
And
creativity comes from the creator himself, right?
absolutely, yeah, absolutely, perfectly said.
Yeah. So, do you have critique partners or critique group that you swap chapters with that helped you with this book?
I do. I have some amazing critique partners: Lori, Christy, Wendy, Jennifer. I mean, I just have so many great people. Brenda, I can't even list them all. Um,
You have a
but
lot.
that takes time to hone that as well. When I first got back into writing, I didn't know where to find critique partners. And so I started just joining critique groups, and some would work and some don't. And that's another thing. You have to find what works for you. And I needed people who would be helpful. I wanted to know what's wrong with this, like, oh, that's so good. And that's great if it is, but I also want to know what's wrong with this. At the same time, I don't want to know everything that's wrong with no encouragement. So I kind of, and my critique partners are wonderful balancers of that. They're very good about saying, wow, this is great, this not so much.
Yeah.
So I had to join a few groups first and then kind of just whittle away until it was like, you're a great critique partner. I'm not going to stay in this group, but can we continue to be critique partners? And that's worked really well for me. I met Lori Altabomber. She's probably my go-to critiquer when I need some really honest, like, what's wrong with this? It's not working. And I met her through ACFW Virginia conference. We just happened to be on the social chat. We found out we were both from Texas. We started emailing, and then we started meeting halfway between. We're about 3 hours apart, so we would meet between like her place and my place, and brainstorm and critique. And you just don't know where you're going to meet that person that's going to bless your work. And I can only pray I've blessed hers half as much as she has mine. But and then my critique partner Christy, same thing. I found her through Faith, Hope, and Love Christian Writers, and has been a huge blessing toward my writing. And Brenda, my friend who got me back into writing, she's the one who invited me to ACFW. She's a valued critiquer for me. So it's just been, finding, but you have to sometimes join if you're just starting out, just get out there, join some critique groups, and you'll find your people that, but you do want to find people that are honest with you, because if they're not telling you what's wrong, they're not helping you succeed. And it's so much nicer to hear, oh, this is so great. Oh, this is great. Oh, wow, I love this. And and it puffs you up, and you just feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. But when you get another critiquer that says, this is great, but this needs work, or this needs tightening, and then you can kind of see that maybe someone's not as far along in their journey. Another thing I would really probably advise or whatever, encourage writers to do, or a new writer or newish writer, is when you have critique partners that are better than you and are willing to really come alongside you and make your work just shine. When you get to a point where you can help a newer author because of the things you've learned, absolutely pay it forward. Because I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about being, especially in a Christian writer environment, is how we can encourage each other and support each other, and we're all in this together. It's a ministry. I don't find it competitive. That's what I've loved about this whole thing with being with Christian fiction writers. It's just been such a joy to come alongside and have them come alongside me, and we all just want to do the best thing we can for God's glory.
Yeah, I've found the same thing, and it's such a blessing to be a part of such a community.
Absolutely.
It's about encouraging and supporting each other on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our time has slipped away. Uh,
Okay.
we could sit here and talk all day, right?
Good. Absolutely. You can be started talking about writing. I
I
could
know.
definitely go on for a while. This
Yes.
has been so much fun. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Well, thanks for sharing, and I'm excited for this to post on the blog. And so your book, Love's, let me get it right, Love's True Calling,
Hmm.
is launching into the world. What's the date?
June 27th.
June 27th. Okay. And
Yeah.
I think that this is going to post like right around that time,
Okay.
within
Great.
a day or so, I think of that.
Okay.
And you're giving away, I think, a ebook,
No, I'd be happy to give away a signed print
paperback,
copy.
a
It just may
signed
not be
print
till
copy,
July.
and
Yeah.
it's to a US winner. Okay.
Yes, unfortunately, in
Yeah.
the US only.
Okay. I understand. Uh, Postage is crazy. All right.
Yes, it is.
Well, thanks so much, Lori. It's been so much fun talking to you, and
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing more books published by you in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Dina. Really, I do.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Talk to you later.
All right.